Hey y'all, welcome to Restless Chipotle. Today we are going to make one of my favorite holiday classics, and that is a Hubbard squash pie. Only since my grocery store didn't have Hubbard squash, I'm making it with butternut squash. And that brings us to one big hint about this particular recipe. You can use any kind of winter squash you want. Hubbard squash, butternut squash, acorn squash, sugar pumpkins, whatever it is, you can use it if it's a winter squash. So don't get locked into, oh, I couldn't find butternut because that's, or oh, I couldn't find Hubbard squash, because that's kind of hard to find in some areas of the country, like Texas. I don't see them very often, at least not in the regular grocery store. So we want to get started with that. Now, you can also use the frozen squash that is in the freezer section, duh. You can also use the one that's frozen in. Sometimes they have Hubbard squash or butternut squash or whatever. That works just fine, and you're going to be able to skip the first steps, but I'm using the fresh picked kind, and because I'm going to roast it, and that gives it an entirely different flavor than just using it from the frozen. So let's get started with that. For our pie, we are going to need butternut squash or Hubbard squash or any of the other kinds that I mentioned, or whatever kind you happen to have available. We're going to need brown sugar, butter, pecans, maple syrup, the real stuff. This is pretty cool. This is bourbon barrel aged, so we get the bourbon in there too. Cinnamon, nutmeg, and I want to tell you about the nutmeg. You guys have heard me or read on the blog where I use the whole nutmegs. They have so much more flavor. It's incredible. If you don't buy whole nutmeg, buy it. All you need is like a microplane like this or some kind of little grater, and it just grates really fast, and I'll show you that later. Anyway, so nutmeg, cloves. I don't think there's going to be anything unexpected here. Ginger, maybe one thing unexpected. I use Chipotle powder in mine. You don't have to use it. I like the extra little zip that it gives it, and I don't use very much. Eggs, cinnamon, heavy cream, and I think that's it. So those are all the things we're going to use later on, and the first thing we're going to do is get this squash ready. So obviously, I'm going to take these labels off. I have 2 pounds of squash here. This is a pretty versatile recipe in that you can use a little bit more, a little bit less, or whatever. The way you're going to prepare it is you're going to rinse it off, and then you're going to cut it in half with a very sharp knife, and try not to cut your fingers off while you're doing it, because cutting your fingers off is very messy indeed. This squash has a tiny, tiny little cavity there, and we're going to clean that out into the bowl, which I thought would be a lot more than that. And I'm going to clean this one out into the bowl. Also, again, thought it would be a lot more than that. That's crazy. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the other one, which seems to be a little bit riper and softer. Not cutting through the stem end. That's a little bit bigger. So this is what it looks like. You're going to take the seeds and the membrane out and put it in your bowl, or wherever you're going to put it, because you're going to throw it out or put it on your compost pile or whatever it is you're going to do with it, right? So there goes that, and there goes that. Now, this squash, because of the size, I'm going to say it's probably going to cook about about 40 minutes at 350. You can put it in like a 13 by 9 inch pan and put it cut side down in that pan, and then put a tiny bit of water in there, like about 1/4 of a cup, and cover it with aluminum foil, seal it in, and bake it that way, and it'll steam. But I don't want mine to steam because I want mine to roast a little bit and get that nice flavor to it. So what I have here is some melted butter, and I'm going to take my squash that is more or less cleaned. You do not have to clean it perfectly because you can get all this stuff out later. I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to brush the cut side of it with butter. Okay, put it there. I'm going to do the same thing over and over again until I'm done getting this all buttered up. I could technically peel this and cut it into cubes and roast it that way, but that's way more effort than I want to do. I don't need it roasted on every single side. I just want it roasted on, you know, on the cut side. So here it is. I'm going to get my pan and we'll go from there. All right, I've got my pan. This is a pan I roast on, so it's clean, but it's not pretty. I'm going to brush the bottom of the pan with some of my butter, just a thin layer, just to make sure that the squash doesn't stick. Then I'm going to put this cut side down on the pan, and it's ready, more or less, ready to go in the oven. And as I said, that'll go in the oven to roast for about 45 minutes, or until it's done. The bottom will be a little caramelized, and at that point we're gonna scoop the inside meat squash stuff out and use it in our recipe. But this is how I'm preparing it. Again, you can totally feel free to use frozen or bake your squash any way that you would bake it. I wouldn't use canned. I don't even know if they have that, but anyway, this is there, taking it to the oven, and I will see you in a little while. Hey y'all, welcome back. So the squash is all cooked and it's very tender, and what we're going to do now is we're going to take out the squash stuff, and I'm going to measure 2 cups of it, and I'm going to measure a generous 2 cups. If there's a little bit more, I'll probably put it in there anyway. It's not going to hurt anything. Be sure that you get out any extra seeds that might be lurking in there still. And I like to really, this is messy, isn't it? I like to scrape it out really well and get all of that out there, because I think that it's the most flavorful right by the skin. And so this is so tender that the skin is really kind of coming up with it. But we're going to get our 2 cups, and there won't be any need to mash this because it's pretty much mashed itself. It's nice and buttery because we put butter in it, or we brushed it with butter, if you recall. Never do that, especially not in video. So if you guys want to email me or message me and say, you shouldn't lick your fingers, just remember that my family has been eating my food for a very long time, and they have learned to deal with me licking my fingers. As long as I'm not serving to anybody else, we're all good. Okay, so here's this. I may have a little bit left over for me. Yay. I love butternut squash. I like any kind of winter squash, butternut, acorn, any of it. My mom used to cut acorn squash in half and seed it, take all the seeds out, and then put a pat of butter in there and about 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. Oh my gosh. Then she used to bake it. And so when it came out of the oven, she just served the half squashes. Just, oh, so good. Right out of the shell. And a lot of times that would be our dinner. I know I've said like hundreds of times, my parents were my mom was born in 1918. I was kind of a late life baby. And so they were older teens and adults during the Depression, and believe me, they didn't waste anything, and they weren't big meat eaters. I mean, my dad loved a good steak or a good hamburger, but as far as having it like every night of the week, it didn't. We ate a lot of vegetables from our garden and stuff like that. So there, now you know all about me. Anyway, so those oftentimes were our dinners, things like that. All right, so I've got this mashed, and I've got 2 cups plus here, and a little bit more down here left for me to taste because it's going to be delicious. And so I'm going to switch the camera angle, and I'll be right back because I want you to be able to see exactly how this is put together. Okay? See you in a minute. So the first thing I'm going to do is, and you can do this easily with just a spoon and a whisk. I don't know why I didn't think about doing that because it even says in the recipe to do that, but whatever. So I'm going to put my squash into the bowl of my mixer, and I'm going to turn it on. Anyway, so that's all mixed up, and you can see it looks a lot like pumpkin pie filling right there. So the next thing we're going to do is taste it because it's so yummy. And I'm going to move this out of the way. Oh, that's heavy. And take the mixer thingies off. And I'm going to get my pie crust, which is right here. There. And all I'm going to do is make sure that I have everything mixed up in here really good. And pour this right into my pie crust. It's very runny. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I have not yet put my nutmeg. And the reason is, oh my gosh, that's good. The reason is that I like to put my nutmeg on the top. Oh, and by the way, I totally want to tell you guys that eating batter that's uncooked, that has raw eggs in it, is very dangerous. So, I will be 60 in April. I've lived a good life. That's all I have to say about that. All right, so here's the nutmeg. It's a whole nutmeg. It looks kind of like a nut, and you just put it. This is not the one that I wanted. The one I want though. Y'all, I'm nothing if I'm not organized. Okay, so this is a microplane, but there's a lot of different things that you can use, but just as long as it has a small grater thing on it. And you just rub the nutmeg along it. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's floating down onto the pie like snow on Denver mountains. I don't know, watching too many Hallmark movies lately. And you put on as much as you like, which for me is a lot. And once, if you've never used fresh nutmeg, I have to tell you that once you start grating it, the whole room smells like nutmeg. It smells so amazing. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put this in the oven and bake it, and then we'll be back. I've got the moment of truth here. We're going to take out a piece of this pie, and see what we've got. Ooh, so pretty. As you can see, it's a little bit lighter than a pumpkin pie in color and also in texture. This doesn't thicken up to like a dense custard pie. You're definitely going to want to refrigerate it overnight before you serve it, but it's very soft. The flavor is more delicate than pumpkin pie. It's got a little nuttiness to it. It's just really absolutely delicious. Perfect for fall and winter holidays. And so unique, absolutely unique. So I'm gonna put a little whipped cream on there. So pretty. And then I'm going to get my nutmeg and garnish it a little bit. Or a lot. I like nutmeg, sorry. Well, I'm not sorry I like it, but I don't know. It's a Southern thing to say you're sorry if you're a woman. It's crazy. I'm trying to break the habit, but I haven't got there yet. Anyway, look at that. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So y'all, here it is. I am going to take a bite right now because it's absolutely one of my favorite pies. It is so good. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. If you don't like pumpkin pie, try this because it's similar but not exact. It's softer. It's lighter in flavor. It's more delicate, but it still has all of that fall flavor that we love in the fall spices. So good. The crust is nice and buttery and flaky. There's a perfect amount, I don't think you can see it, but there's a perfect amount of crust on the bottom. It was a perfect thickness. There is nothing about this pie not to like. So good, so delicious. I hope you make it for Thanksgiving. If you don't, make it for another day because yum. And I am going to talk to you guys later. Love you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.